Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Emma, I'm a professional writer and I'm here today to give you some banging editing tips. Editing is the process of chopping up your work and making it better, almost like a Frankenstein's monster, you know, you're taking a human, chopping them up, bringing them back to life and making them better than they were before, only this time there's no murderous rampages. I like to think of editing as the 3 C's: correcting, clarifying and condensing. Really it's a lot more things as well, but those are the main ones for me when I am editing either my own work or the work of others. Editing is a wicked skill to have. It's probably why there is an entire profession dedicated to the art of editing, because it's so goddamn tricky. So I'm going to give you an editing checklist and also some things that you might want to look out for when you're reviewing your work, and most importantly when to edit and how to go about it. The way that I like to do it anyway works for me, hopefully it will work for you too. Let's start at the very beginning, shall we? The writing process. Do not edit while you write. Do not edit while you write. Just write. Just write without even thinking about editing, because if you start to self-edit as you're working, you're going to block yourself creatively, you're not going to get anywhere, it's going to take much longer, and you're kind of stopping the divergent part of your brain from just coming up with new and exciting, cool ideas. During the writing process, all you want to be thinking about is the brief and just exploring every possibility within your writing. Do not think about editing whatsoever at this stage. Now that you've finished your piece of work and you've got a whole page of basically just mental shit dumped down, leave it for as long as possible. I personally like to sleep on it and go back to it fresh first thing in the morning, but if I don't have the luxury of that much time, I will just leave it for an hour or so while I go away and do another job, or go away and take a tea break, take a walk around the park, whatever it is, to clear all of that content out of my mind. And the reason that you need to do this is because you're going to be a lot fresher when you come back. You'll have forgotten what you've written. Your mind won't be quite so dead to any errors or mistakes or any of the things that I'm going to mention on my editing checklist later on. So it's incredibly important that you let the work rest for a certain period of time. I like to do it overnight, but you know, whatever works for you, works for you. When you come back to your freshly risen piece of writing after letting it rest for a while, you're going to want to have your initial brief to hand. Give it a read through and familiarise yourself with the aims and objectives of the piece of writing that you have achieved. I find this extremely helpful because there is every chance that in the writing process, somewhere along the way, I've wandered off and actually haven't been on brief at all. So give that thing a good read through, have the objectives clear in your mind. If there are things that needed to be included in the creative work, it's also helpful to make sure and tick off whether or not you have done that, and this will help you cut everything down and refine it and make sure that it is completely spear pointed towards achieving the objectives. So just make sure that you've got that fresh in your mind when you go back to check your work. So here we go, your editing checklist. Number 1, are your sentences short, snappy and easy to read? People do not want to read a sentence that is about 4 lines long. That's not a sentence really, it's a paragraph. You should have a full stop in there somewhere. I generally like to have the rule of thumb that if I've used more than 2 commas, I probably need to have 2 sentences, not 1, and I look for a way to cut that down and make it much shorter. The same goes for lots of different types of punctuation within one sentence. Have you used semicolons and em dashes and brackets and commas? Really, you should be trying to limit the amount of punctuation within a sentence, and this is because as people are reading it, their brains are recognising the punctuation and kind of setting that parameter on your writing and framing it up as it were, or acknowledging that there's a break or a pause or an aside. Too many of those, it's disruptive. People aren't reading the words, they aren't immersed in the narrative or the dialogue or the text or the story you're trying to tell. They're just looking at punctuation and in their minds subconsciously reframing every single word that they're reading, and it's really disruptive. So try to limit punctuation down by making your sentences much shorter. This can often be achieved as well by finding different ways to phrase things so that you don't need to use as much punctuation in the sentence. I'm not saying don't use punctuation, because that's a horrible mistake. Do use punctuation and use it properly, but just try to limit it down and make your sentences much shorter so they're easier to read. Same goes for paragraphs actually. I like to keep my paragraphs relatively short, especially when I'm writing content for the web or blog posts or especially emails. My goal in that situation is to pull people through the content and get them onto the next line and the next line and the next line by structuring it in a very tantalising way so that they'll want to hop onto the next paragraph. If they look at the page and see a big block of text, it's going to put them off and they may not read. So you need to break your paragraphs down as well as your sentences. Next up, you need to look at your choice of words. This is because some words have double meanings. And the last thing you want is for people to read a sentence and have no idea what it is you're trying to say. You've interpreted the word one way, they've interpreted it another way, and you end up in a little place I like to call Confusion City. So have a read objectively and think to yourself, does this sentence really make sense? Can I chop out that word and replace it with one that's a lot more concise or a lot more appropriate for the situation or what I'm trying to say? Running on the theme of words, it is repeated words. Sometimes when you get a word stuck in your head and you are using it in a certain scenario or situation to explain something in your writing, you go back to it again and again and again and again. If you notice that starting to happen in your writing, make a point of going through and picking out each time you've used that word. It's not uncommon to find that you've used the same word twice in the same sentence. Now, I'm not talking about words like and, but, and the, and a. That's just dumb. You need to use those words several times. Are there other ways you can say it? Are there other ways that you can phrase the sentence so that you're getting the point across but not reverting to the same tactic each and every time? So do look out for repeated words in your copy. Obviously, up next you're going to check your grammar, punctuation and spelling. There are common errors that do occur just out of habit if it's ingrained in you. I've done a video on how to spot these and what they might be, so I'll pop that for you in the description box below so you can check it out. There are too many for me to go into here, but there are several common offenders, and if there are things that you know that you regularly mess up on, might be worth making yourself a little list so that you can go through and check it, and eventually you may be able to stamp the habit out. But basic spelling, grammar and punctuation, and for the love of God, do not always rely on your word processor to pick these things up for you. The spelling may be set to American and it might mess you right up. So don't be lazy, do give it a manual check as well. Have you written in active voice? This is an interesting one, another that I've actually done a video on and a blog post, I believe. Links will be below for those, but in essence, when you write in passive voice, your writing is really friggin' boring. It's a boring way to write and it turns people off like that. So you will want to make sure that your writing is active, especially if it's something like an email or a piece of marketing. You want to keep people engaged and inspire them into action and make them feel part of it, not passive voice, which basically makes you a backseat driver in your own writing. So what is active voice? That is where you are putting the noun or subject before the verb in your sentence. So I'll give you a sexy example. It sounds boring. It sounds like grandma. Don't write in passive voice unless you want people to be bored off their tits with your writing. Finally, let's come to the call to action. Is it strong? Do you have a verb at the start of it perhaps, which makes people want to go? Have you made it nice and short? Have you made it specific? People like to know where they're going. or they like to be told what to do next or where to go specifically. So even if it's a blog post, round it off with something like leave a comment below. What did you think? Open up the dialogue, you know, get people talking, tell them what you want them to do. Print marketing, same thing, sign off, give them a strong CTA, go here, call this number, use this code. Let's not get too fancy, let's not use too many words, keep it short, keep it obvious and clear and direct and super simple. You can see why you would need to implement all of these techniques when you've just basically, in the writing process, gone and written everything out in one long chunk. You do have to write that way because that's where all of the good stuff is. It's just a case of then going through it afterwards, chopping it all up, picking out that really good stuff and making it shine, axing the rest that you just don't need. It's a very niche skill. Something you've definitely got to work on. If you are interested in working on your editing techniques, I do have an exercise for that in a video that I've made for you before, and I will link it below just in case you want to go off and have a practice of your editing skills. As I said, it's wicked to know. If you're shit at editing, your writing is probably going to be very unrefined, very long, very boring, and have absolutely no direction whatsoever. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions you'd like to ask, you can pop a comment below and I will certainly answer them, or you can find me on Twitter at EJ Cownley. And until next week, take care and peace out.